This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Stocks fly. The S&P 500 closes at a record. The Dow within 1% of one as earnings season gets underway. And those profits need to start growing again to keep the market's mojo moving on up.
New competition. Can Boeing and Airbus shift their business flight plans and fend off a potential threat to their dominance?
What's old is new again. It was a 90s game. Now it's one of the hottest apps out there. But can Pokemon Go usher in the big turnaround Nintendo shareholders have been looking for? All that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Monday, July 11th.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Epperson, in tonight for Sue Herrera.
And I'm Tyler Matheson. Welcome, everyone. Well, the Wall Street bull is alive and kicking. The S&P 500 closed at a new high today, something it hadn't done in more than a year. Investors still giddy after that blockbuster June jobs report on Friday that seemingly put a lid on fears that the U.S. economy is slowing down. Some say investors want to buy U.S. equities simply because there's so much global uncertainty and so few investing alternatives out there. And today, buy they did. The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed 80 points to 18,226. The S&P 500 rose 7 to that record close, and the Nasdaq, which had crossed the 5,000 mark earlier in the day, settled just a smidge below it.
Earnings season is officially underway. Alcoa topped earnings expectations after profit from its car and jet parts businesses offset weaker results in its other units due to declines in metals prices. The company that will be splitting into two later this year earned 15 cents a share. Estimates were for 9 cents. Revenues were slightly better than estimates, though 10% lower from a year ago. Those better than expected results helped give shares a boost in initial after-hours trading. Susan Lee has more on Alcoa's quarterly results.
For Alcoa, a much better quarter than estimates. The bar was set pretty low, though, for the quarter, with the expectations of a big earnings and revenue drop from a year ago. Lower aluminum and alumina pricing continuing to drag, but then recent acquisitions and organic growth helping lift revenue in the quarter. Alcoa also reassuring the markets that the company is still on track to separate into two separate entities. Alcoa housing its commodities business in the future, and Arconic its manufacturing business, and they're looking for the split to happen in the back half of this year. Now, the analysts that I spoke to say that aerospace is a key for Alcoa going forward, with Airbus and Boeing both raising production targets next year, which should help drive Alcoa's value-added business. Here's CEO Klaus Kleinfeld on the aerospace demand.
We predict for the second half a growth of 6%, and we actually see in 2017 a double-digit growth in this market. And when you look at the fundamentals are very, very strong.
Now, analysts expect the company's aerospace exposure to really be a key driver of its business going forward, especially for the Arconic division when the split does happen sometime later on in 2016. For Nightly Business Reports, I'm Susan Lee.
As the profit reporting season gets rolling, investors will watch to see if quarterly results improve and whether the earnings recession is ending. But as Bob Pisani explains, that could be a lot easier said than done.
Another earnings season is starting in the red. The second quarter would be the 5th consecutive quarter of negative earnings growth, the worst showing since 2008 to 2009. But don't worry, analysts are expecting earnings to turn positive in the third and especially in the fourth quarter. Here's the problem. A lot has to go right to get rid of the earnings recession that we've been experiencing. That's because analysts are expecting earnings to improve in the second half of the year in most of the largest S&P 500 sectors, including technology, industrial, healthcare, financials, and even energy. But a strong dollar could negatively influence earnings at many multinationals, and continuing low interest rates could be an issue for some financials. And the price of oil companies is very closely correlated to the price of oil. So improving earnings there depends on oil going up or, at the very least, stabilizing. Now, all of this could happen, but getting it all right on top of an improving economy is a lot to ask. One final point. It's true that prices in the stock market do not always correlate to earnings growth. It isn't now, largely because of outsized stimulus measures. But don't kid yourself. In the long run, the trajectory of earnings has always mattered in the valuation of stocks. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Bob Pisani at the New York Stock Exchange.
Well, it certainly hasn't been a straight line for the financial markets so far this year. In fact, it's been a pretty bumpy ride, raising the age-old question, do you need to be an active or passive investor to make money in this market? Matt Maley is equity strategist at Miller Tabak. He joins us now to discuss. And Matt, I saw an interesting statistic earlier today from S&P Global saying that about 2/3 of stocks in the S&P 500 have moved about 10% since the May 2015 high in the market. And about 40% have moved 20% or more. What that means is it's a stock picker's market. And so does that mean one needs to be an active investor as an individual investor?
Well, I think it does. The one thing where people say that first of all, I don't think we should go back to the day traders, the days of the 1990s when people were day trading, because some of these whipsaws that you've talked about are round trippers, and people can get slammed very easily. But the thing is, when you get a market to a position where it's as expensive as it is today, and I view that by the CAPE ratio, the PE ratio, which is above 25 again, and we saw that in 2000 and 2008, the market tends to stall out. And if the people can move around a little bit into specific stocks and groups, that way they can do a little bit better than the market. I mean, I guess my point is, people say, geez, if you just sit, you can't time the market, just sit in an index fund and let it ride it out. Well, that's fine. If you did that from 1995 till today, you made a nice profit. But when the CAPE ratio got above 25 in those two instances, and you pulled back a little bit and moved around, you actually did a lot better. So I think that could be the same thing happen this time around.
I beg to differ a little bit, Matt. I am a big believer in the efficiency of passive investing, the economical qualities that it have. But I'll grant you the idea that doesn't mean you can just set it and let it go. There are times when you need to heavy up and times where you want to take profits. So what you're suggesting here is not active market timing, is it?
No, not at all. That's a very good point, Tyler. I mean, again, you don't want to become a day trader, and then Brexit vote happens one day, and then we got the Fed speaking the next day. But you can, when the risk reward changes for specific groups or for specific stocks, you can move your portfolio around. I mean, I'm talking months apart rather than days apart. Mm-hmm. But a great instance is what we're here on the defensive side of things. Utility stocks. I'm sorry, they had a great run. We were lucky enough to be very early on this group. But the group's up 27% since we started pushing the group, and it's got its PE ratio is well above 20 now. It's gotten very expensive. One group that hasn't, that's been lagged, that is traditionally a defensive group, has been the healthcare stocks. They're flat on the year. Mm-hmm. Now, there's some minefields in healthcare stocks, so you have to be discriminate there. But suddenly, we're saying that when you got a group that's very expensive versus a group that's been lagging badly, but is also on a technical basis breaking out, you can shift around a little bit and make some money.
The bottom line, Matt, though, as you point out, is that you really need to do your homework here. Whether you're looking at individual stocks or you're moving between different types of mutual funds, you really want to know which ones have a long track record, even if you are deciding not to stick with it for a very long time like you would an index fund. You make some very good points here, Matt. Matt Maley with Miller Tabak, thanks so much.
Well, the head of the Kansas City Federal Reserve says interest rates are just too low. Longtime critic of low interest rates, Esther George, believes the rebound in hiring in June is reason enough to push interest rates higher. During a speech today in Missouri, she said rates this low can create economic risks, especially with the economy at or near full employment.
Now to China, where an international tribunal is set to issue a long-awaited ruling that challenges China's territorial claims in the South China Sea. The area represents $5 trillion in trade, and it pits the interests of the world's second-largest economy against those of the first. Eunice Yoon reports tonight from Beijing.
Ahead of the Hague ruling, China's propaganda machine is on full throttle, asserting what Beijing sees as its rights in the South China Sea. The Communist Party papers have been painting Beijing as a victim of a Washington-led attempt to control China's rising power. Meanwhile, official state TV has been running stories all day, saying that nearly 70 countries have voiced their support for Beijing's position in the disputed waters. China claims almost all of the South China Sea, but its neighbors don't accept that position. They have their own claims, including the Philippines, which has taken its case to the tribunal, arguing that China is violating international law. Chinese officials have already said they will ignore what the court says, and over the weekend, China held military exercises in the disputed waters. For the U.S., the issue is vitally important. Beijing is seen as challenging Washington's role in Asia, as well as the American-led security system, which has been at the foundation of Asia's economic rise. $5 trillion worth of trade is shipped through these waters. The U.S. has repeatedly challenged China's rights to the sea and has increased naval patrols. It says that it's doing that to support its allies and uphold international law. The fear now is if the court rules against China, Beijing could take more aggressive action, which could potentially lead to even greater conflict. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eunice Yoon in Beijing.
The United Kingdom will have a new prime minister, and soon. Theresa May will become the next occupant of 10 Downing Street. Current Prime Minister David Cameron says he will resign Wednesday. May will take over at a time of great economic and political uncertainty for the country after the vote a couple of weeks ago to leave the European Union. May will become the UK's second female prime minister. Margaret Thatcher, of course, was the first.
New planes and new challenges are dominating this year's Farnborough Air Show in London. For industry titans Boeing and Airbus, the big question is, how do they manage a massive backlog of orders as new companies enter the mix? Phil LeBeau has more from Farnborough, England.
After years of soaring higher with huge orders for new planes, Boeing and Airbus are shifting their flight plans. The focus now, delivering more planes and cutting into a massive backlog of orders.
We got about 5,700 commercial airplanes in our backlog today. We still expect a book-to-bill of about 1 this year, so a steady orders flow, not as great as previous years, stronger in narrow bodies than wide bodies, but this is about execution now and successfully delivering on that backlog.
Boeing and Airbus have increased their annual deliveries, and their latest models, which are more fuel efficient, are in demand. But new commercial airplanes, like the CS-100 from Canadian plane maker Bombardier, is an option for airlines. In this case, offering a plane with a wider aisle and seats than those found on most planes in service.
So we believe that we have a very unique solution, and the customer really liked that.
Is this new plane coming from a company based in Canada a long-term threat to the dominance of Boeing and Airbus?
You've got a better experience through the in-flight entertainment, perhaps. The whole experience has the potential to be better than what you might get on other planes today.
Perhaps the best news for plane makers is that overall demand for new aircraft shows no sign of slowing down, particularly in Asia, where a rising middle class is seeking more flights to more cities. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Farnborough, England.
Still ahead, $1 billion lawsuit and a lot of questions about social media's role when its platform is used by terrorists. Summer driving is getting a little less expensive. The average price of a gallon of regular gasoline down 7 cents over the past 3 weeks, now at $2.29 nationally. According to the Lundberg survey, the current price is 54 cents less than a year ago, and that is because of a drop in oil prices and an abundant supply of gasoline. The highest average price in the lower 48 was in San Francisco at $2.90 a gallon. The lowest down in Charleston, South Carolina, $1.91.
To politics now. Donald Trump says he will decide on his vice presidential pick in the next few days, and that he's leaning toward a political pick rather than a military one. John Harwood is following the Veep stakes from Washington. John, the conventions are coming up. Both sides are going to soon pick their running mates. What's happening on that front with Donald Trump?
Well, what's happening is a bit of a The Bachelor reality show. Donald Trump is appearing with serially with potential choices. He's campaigned in recent days with Newt Gingrich. Today he was with Chris Christie. Tomorrow, he's going to be with Mike Pence, the governor of Indiana. He's somebody who a lot of people think is at the top of that list, and trying to suss out how he campaigns alongside them, what the personal vibe is. And as Donald Trump said, we'll get the decision by the end of the week.
And how about Hillary Clinton?
Well, Hillary Clinton's doing something of the same thing. She has campaigned or used as a surrogate Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey. She recently went out with Elizabeth Warren, the populist, fiery senator from Massachusetts. And later this week, she's going to campaign with Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, who is seen by many as the front runner for that vice presidential slot. So again, you test your personal chemistry, your campaign dais chemistry with that person, and then make your decision.
Meanwhile, the nation remains riveted, John, on the recent violence in Dallas, in Minneapolis, Baton Rouge, and this afternoon in Southwest Michigan. What did the candidates have to say today?
Well, Hillary Clinton did not have public events, so she was silent apart from a few tweets. But Donald Trump very notably gave a speech on veterans, and at the beginning of his speech, he had a passage where he said, "I am the law and order candidate." He talked about standing with police officers. He also said he was going to be the candidate of compassion. But that is a memorable phrase in American politics, law and order candidate. That sent a message that he was standing with the police in the disputes and protests that are going on across the country.
All right. There you have it. John Harwood in Washington. Thanks.
Microsoft and General Electric ink a deal in the cloud. And that's where we begin tonight's market focus. General Electric's software platform called Predix will be available on Microsoft's cloud platform beginning next year. Through Predix, industrial companies connect machines and devices to the cloud to gather data. And under the new transaction, current Predix customers will get access to Microsoft cloud offerings. Shares of Microsoft up 0.5% to 52.59. GE fluttered up 1 cent to 32.21. Starbucks will raise the base pay of its U.S. employees by at least 5% starting in October. The coffee chain will also double the amount of stock reward for employees who've worked at least 2 years at the company. As a result, employees can expect their compensation to rise between 5 and 15%. Starbucks shares off a little bit at 56.32.
Tyler, Kimberly-Clark now is halting operations in Venezuela. The maker of Kleenex tissues and Huggies diapers said a shortage of primary materials and rising inflation has made it impossible to continue business in the South American country. Shares did not react much to the news, though. They rose a fraction to 136.14. Shares of Alliance Data Systems got a lift today after activist hedge fund ValueAct Capital disclosed it had a nearly 7% stake in the provider of credit card loyalty programs. Alliance shares rose 4.5% to $210.39. The Securities and Exchange Commission is reportedly investigating Tesla to determine if the automaker violated a securities law by not reporting a fatal crash in self-driving vehicles back in May. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. Tesla says it has not received any communication from the SEC regarding the possible investigation. The SEC had no comment. Shares of Tesla fell in after-hours trading following the news, but finished the regular session up more than 3% to $224.78.
U.S. terror victims are suing Facebook for $1 billion. A lawsuit filed in New York federal court alleges the social media giant, quote, knowingly provided support and resources for the Gaza terror group Hamas. How will this impact Facebook and other social media companies? John Browning is a partner at Passman & Jones law firm and is a professor of law at Southern Methodist University's Dedman School. He is not, his firm nor he is a party to this lawsuit. Professor, welcome. Good to have you with us. Is this suit likely to move forward, or do you think it will be thrown out of court?
Well, I think ultimately it's going to be thrown out of court because there's while there's a federal statute that allows victims of terrorism to bring civil suits such as this, there's also a federal statute that's been cited in numerous cases to shield social media companies like Facebook and Twitter from civil liability.
This is not the first time that a social media company has had a lawsuit against it for terrorism. What does this mean for the Facebooks, the Twitters, the other social media sites in terms of what the future may be for the legal proceedings against them?
Well, there are other cases currently pending. There are 2 in California, 1 in San Francisco, federal court and another. One was filed against Twitter, another was filed against other social media companies by victims of terrorism overseas. Ultimately, the legal defense that the social media companies like Facebook and Twitter are likely to assert or have already asserted is likely to be granted. But in the meantime, the very fact that these lawsuits are being brought certainly brings heightened awareness to this issue and underscores the fact that social media companies, which have been doing have taken a number of steps to address terrorist activity on their sites, need to continue doing more.
Do the social media companies have an obligation under the law to police their sites to remove inflammatory or insightful material that could be seen as glorifying violence, glorifying terror, calling individuals to join terror groups? What's the obligation under the law?
Well, there's really no legal obligation. They have a legal shield, in fact, under a federal statute called the Communications Decency Act. But they do have their own internal policies, and Facebook certainly has this, Twitter as well, that states that they will police their sites and take down content that is advocating violence, supporting terrorism, and so forth. And in fact, earlier this year, Twitter announced that it had disabled or taken down over 125,000 accounts with ties to or supportive of terrorism.
What if they miss something? Could they be, could someone allege negligence?
Really, there's no legal basis for it. We've allowed social media companies to have this wide latitude so as not to discourage free expression. Of course, it has its downsides, as we see here, but we've left it up to the social media companies themselves to police themselves. And they have enacted their own internal policies. They claim to be doing more, and we'll see how that shakes out.
Professor, thank you very much. John Browning with Passman and Jones Law Firm.
Thank you.
Coming up, a smartphone, an app, and a surprise hit that could bring in a new era for mobile gaming and trigger a turnaround for Nintendo.
The biggest sale ever in sports history. It is not a basketball team, a baseball franchise, an NFL franchise, but it is a mixed martial arts league. Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC, sold for $4 billion after being purchased back in 2000 by its principals for just $2 million. That's a return with a punch, folks. The buyers, a group led by a Hollywood talent agency that includes private equity firms Silver Lake and Kohlberg Kravis Roberts. Here's how the sale compares to other recent sports purchases. In 2012, the LA Dodgers bought out of bankruptcy for a little more than $2 billion. The LA Clippers for $2 billion in 2014. The sport combines different types of fighting, including boxing, kickboxing, wrestling. Since 2000, UFC has gone mainstream, drawing stadium crowds of up to 70,000. Also has big-name sponsors as well as large broadcast and pay-per-view audiences.
Tyler, not sure if you know this, but there is a new craze that is sweeping the nation. And to understand it, you have to think back to the late 1990s when Pokemon was all the buzz. Today, you can still catch them, but there's a modern twist. A smartphone, a mobile game, and augmented reality. The new game, Pokemon Go, has gone viral, and shares of Nintendo have soared since the game was released last Thursday. And as Julia Borston reports, this could be the start of something much, much bigger.
Pokemon Go is a new free augmented reality Nintendo app, which uses smartphones' GPS and cameras to bring Pokemon characters into the real world on your phone's screen. Players chase the characters through the real streets.
This was big for augmented reality, which has sort of always been this thing in our minds that we don't really know how it translates when you put it out there into people's hands.
Its popularity sending Nintendo shares surging 25% in Tokyo trading Monday, following a 10% jump on Friday, when the game hit the top of the iTunes app chart for the most downloaded and the highest grossing app in the countries where it's available. This as people pay for in-game add-ons. Pokemon Go helping Nintendo recover after the disappointing and delayed launch of its first mobile game last October. Even Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella weighing in, saying the game's popularity bodes well for Microsoft's HoloLens augmented reality in the works.
I think it's fantastic to see these augmented reality applications getting built, because the best thing that can happen when you're creating a new category is for applications that are these killer apps, whether it be game or in the industrial scenario, to get invested in. And so this Pokemon interest hopefully will translate into a lot of interest even in HoloLens.
Analyst reaction is mixed. Jefferies, with a buy rating on the stock, is bullish, saying this game is the tip of the iceberg for Nintendo's move into mobile, while Nomura warns that the rally looks excessive. Nintendo does not get to keep all that revenue, sharing it with developer Niantic, among others.
One of the things that I think I'm skeptical about is Nintendo didn't develop this. Like, this is a licensing deal. The company that kind of built it was spun out of Google. So I'm not sure it tells us anything about Nintendo's sort of long-term innovation. But, it's good for them in the short run.
But for now, at least, the game, which looks like this, is such a huge hit that servers have crashed and people have crashed into things as they walk around looking at their phones and looking at this augmented reality world, trying to find characters like this one.
The NYPD even tweeting to warn people not to play the game while driving. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston in Los Angeles.
And to read more about Pokemon Go, and you want to now, head to our website at nbr.com.
I think Pokemon Go is coming to a house near me
Absolutely,
very
and
soon.
mine too.
Yeah.
Maybe my phone before I even know it. That's Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sharon Epperson. Thanks for watching.
I'm Tyler Matheson. Thanks for me as well. Have a great evening, everybody, and we will see you back here tomorrow night.